Hi, I'm Eileen Bild. I'm with OTEL Talk, and today I have Keith Bradford. Hi, Keith.
Hey, how are you doing, Eileen?
I am doing awesome, thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about Keith. He is a 2005 honorary inductee in the Rhode Island Country Music Hall of Fame and is still active in Nashville long after Opryland, where he started and closed. He was frontman of the Tennessee Mountain Boys along with his brother Mike. They own and operate NBRN, an online radio station. Keith has over 500 songs to his credit as a songwriter, and there are over 500 TV shows that Keith either hosted or produced and include country, gospel, and bluegrass music and interviews. Wow, Keith, you have quite a extensive background in the music industry. So I think in today's talk, let's take you back in time and start at the beginning, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about each of the milestones and the turning points in your life that have brought you to today.
Well, Eileen, when you're 72 years old, your timeline is quite lengthy.
All right, well, I'll be sure we keep a track on time.
Well, the musical part of it started when I was 8 years old. My parents decided, since they didn't play an instrument and neither one of them could sing, they were going to have a kid that could play at some kind of an instrument. So they got me piano lessons. And the piano lessons was from an elderly woman that was the church organist, where she played the big pipe organ up in the loft with the choir at St. Joseph's Church in Pasco, Rhode Island, my hometown. And on the side, she gave piano lessons. And she had this amazing baby grand piano set up in her living room where she gave the lessons. And I might add, these lessons were very short-lived because of something I did.
Oh, no.
After a couple of weeks of lessons, I was still struggling with chopsticks. I wasn't a very good student, to say the least. And I wasn't really interested in piano lessons to begin with. But on the side of our lot where we lived, there was this big, huge pig nut tree. A lot of people don't even know what pig nuts are. They're kind of like small chestnuts, but they're maybe the size, with the husk on it, they're about the size of a quarter coin. Well, every year, every kid in the neighborhood would gather up those pig nuts, is what they're called. You can Google it. They'll show you pictures of it. And because especially the elderly people, they really loved the taste of the meat inside those pig nuts. It was a real sweet meat. And I would gather up bags of them for my parents and my grandparents. But there was a problem with pig nuts. That is, when you open up the husk, it leaves a stain on your fingers. And it's like you just dipped your fingers in iodine. And it's so toxic to the flesh that it has to wear off. You can't even wash it off. It has to wear. So I showed up to my piano lessons with this beautiful baby grand piano, and my hands looked like I had just dumped them in a gallon bucket of iodine. And she said, "I'm calling your parents. You're not touching my piano with those hands." And she called my parents, and that was the end of my piano lessons.
Oh, so where did you go?
So that's how I got started in the music business.
Oh, that's a memorable start.
But you got to advance it now to I'm 10 or 11. My grandparents are from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. and they absolutely adored polkas, polka music. And so now my parents decide, well, I'm going to get him accordion lessons.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm on the accordion, and there's no more pig nuts. We've already moved to another town. There's no pig nut tree. There's no stained hands. And I'm learning to play what my grandparents absolutely adored, which was these polkas. Well, on Sunday afternoons, my grandparents on my mother's side would line up all the grandkids, and they'd have their own little floor show. And no matter what each kid could do, even if it was just reciting the alphabet, it didn't matter what it was. One by one, we would have to stand up there in front of the aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews, and grandparents would have to stand there on a Sunday afternoon at their house, and we'd have to do something entertaining for this floor show. Well, I got up there and I played Roll Out the Barrel, Beer Barrel Polka at 10 years old on my little accordion. And when I got through, all the aunts and uncles and all the ones that were clapping, they threw nickels at me.
Oh.
And I reached down and I started scooping up these nickels. There was $2. I was 10 years old. There was $2 worth of nickels. And I decided right then, at 10 years old, I wanted to be in show business. Because if all I had to do was stand there and play a polka on my accordion and make $2, that was far more than I was getting delivering newspapers.
Absolutely. You got the bug.
So then my brother, not my brother Mike that we own the radio station with, but another brother that you don't know about, my brother Richard, he decided he was going to play the banjo. So he took 5-string banjo lessons and was learning all the latest bluegrass songs by Flatt Scruggs that played the theme song for the Beverly Hillbillies and played the theme song to the movie Bonnie and Clyde. And I was trying to play along with him on my accordion, and it sounded like crap. It sounded terrible. An accordion and a banjo just don't mix. So I ditched the accordion and I got an upright bass. Big bass fiddle. And now the left hand of the accordion is the bass. I had already learned the bass, only I had learned it by pushing buttons on the left-hand side of the accordion. I took that knowledge and applied it to the 4 strings on the upright bass, and pretty soon I was an accomplished bass player that could play with any bluegrass band because I had taken all the knowledge from the accordion, the left-hand side, which is the bass, and applied it to the upright bass. And now he was playing the banjo, I was playing the bass, and we had a friend, a girl in high school with us that played the guitar. And she was playing like Peter, Paul, and Mary songs, and because the folk music scene had come on by then. So now there's 3 of us, my brother Richard, Kathy, and me, and we're playing bluegrass music. And we're not even old enough to drive a car. So my parents had to take us everywhere we went. And we were in this show one time, and the guy that was the head of the USO, Pierce B. Johnson, he's gone, long gone, saw us perform. And you got to remember, none of us are even old enough to drive an automobile yet. And he literally took us under his wing and put us on the road when we were on summer break from high school doing military bases. Just the 3 of us, the banjo, the upright bass, and her playing the guitar. And we were singing too. And we actually played USO shows as very young teenagers.
That must have been exciting to be able to do that.
It was very exciting and very rewarding because even though we were playing the military bases in New England, half the military bases, the soldiers and sailors and airmen were from the South, and they couldn't get that kind of music in Bangor, Maine,
No.
where we were playing the military base, and they were just loving it. They were hearing their kind of music that they loved for the first time in months, maybe even years. So we were a hit. I mean, we were a big hit playing that kind of music on USO shows because of the audience. Well, you advance the clock, and now we're past the little three-piece young teenagers, and I've progressed considerably. And there's a songwriter in Providence, Rhode Island named Jimmy Crane that wrote 7 #1 pop hits in his career, including Hurt, that Elvis Presley, Juice Newton, Roy Hamilton recorded, songs that Doris Day, Eddie Fisher, If I Give My Heart to You, If I Ever Needed You, I Need You Now. These are all #1 pop hits in the 50s. And he's an elderly gentleman at this point, and he says, I'll pay you. He says, I'll bring in the musicians. We'll go into the recording studio, and I'll pay you to demo all my new songs. Well, I had never sang a demo in my life, but I was willing to accept the challenge. And he put me in the studio in Cranston, Rhode Island. And we had already recorded 3 or 4 of his demos. And it was time to take a lunch break. And he was out in the front lobby reading the New York Times. And he said, Keith, look at this. And it was an ad for this place called Opryland in Nashville, Tennessee, that was taking auditions in New York City. And this was in 1976, to show you where the timeline has regressed since I was 8 years old. We're up to 1976 now. Okay. And he said, I think you should go. I think you should audition. I said, Jimmy, I've got a Dodge Dart car with 4 ball tires, and I don't even have enough money to pay for the gas that it's going to take to drive to New York. And he said, I want you to go. I'm going to put you on a train. So he bought me a train ticket that I boarded the train in Providence. I had my guitar with me, and I went to New York City, and I took a cab from the train depot to a place called Harlequin Rehearsal Studios. And it was in the dead of winter. And all the big signs, West Side Story, Calcutta, Annie Get Your Gun, all the shows that were playing, that was the district I was in, where Harlequin Rehearsal Studios were. And there was a line shaped like a jelly roll all the way around the outside of the building, where people were standing in line in the shivering cold, waiting to get inside to sing one song to audition. And finally, it was my turn to get there in front of those judges that were sitting at a table, kind of like American Idol. Mm-hmm. And I sang Silver Wings by Merle Haggard. And this one guy, one of the judges, he said, well, that was very nice, but is that the only voice you have? And I just knew they hated me. I just knew this was not the place for me. They hated me. They didn't like my singing. I said, well, sir, that's the way I sing. That's my voice. He said, well, that was very attractive, but I want to know, do you have any other voice? I said, do you mean like an impersonation? I said, I can sing a verse and a chorus of Ernest Tubb singing Waltz Across Texas. And he said, proceed. So I sang a verse and a chorus of Waltz Across Texas, doing the best impersonation I could do of one of my idols, Ernest Tubb. He literally fell on the floor, laughing his heart out. And all the other judges, they just couldn't believe somebody was in New York City singing a song made famous by Ernest Tubb and the Texas Troubadours. So I passed the vocal audition. The long and the short is I passed the vocal audition. But now the choreographer is sitting there as one of the judges, and she says, "Can you come back tomorrow for callbacks?" I didn't even know what a callback was. I thought it was a phone call. I didn't know what a callback was. You got to remember the color green. I was green.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I think I have enough money to stay in a hotel overnight and I can come back tomorrow. So I did. I stayed at the Roosevelt Hotel and I came back the next day. And the first thing she had us doing, all the ones that came for the callback, first thing she had us doing was the Charleston. Well, I had played music up until that point in my career, and I didn't know how to dance because I was the guy that played the music for the dance. Not the dancer, but the musician that played the dances. I couldn't dance. And they must have wanted me pretty badly because she literally grabbed my legs and moved my legs the way she wanted me to move them. And I managed to get through that dance choreographers to please her enough that I got hired on the spot. And it was time to sign the paperwork. And at this point, I was married with 3 kids, 3 little babies that weren't even in school. And we were still living in Rhode Island. And after I signed the contract, the producer said, "When will you be relocating to Nashville?" Relocating to Nashville? What are you talking about? And he said, well, what are you going to do? Commute back and forth from Providence, Rhode Island to Nashville every day to do your 4 shows? I didn't even know what Opryland was. I thought it was a carnival. I didn't know it was a theme park that I would have to relocate. So I relocated. I left my wife and 3 kids behind. I jumped in that car with them 4 ball tires, $50 in my pocket, and moved to Nashville. And after I completed the first season, I picked up the phone and called my wife. And I said, I really like it here. I think I want to move here. I think I want to stay here. And she said, "You're drunk." I said, "Yeah, I know it, but I want to move here." And we got a big U-Haul truck and I went back home and we got everything loaded up. And that was in 1977 because I auditioned in 76.
Right.
And we've been here ever since.
Here's your host, Keith Bradford.
You gotta love it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into this week's episode of You Gotta Love It. We start out with a clip that was taken center stage in Sulphur, Indiana, at the Hoosier Junction Opry. It's yours truly on stage singing "I Picked a Rose for Mama" as we try to raise money for the Norton Children's Hospital benefit, the 3rd annual. And right now, let's go ahead and watch that clip. And when I come back, I'll tell you more about it.
I picked a rose for Mama on a very special day. I remember all so clearly why she looked at me that way. She knew by the rose I gave her what I was trying to say. The love in her face was shining when I gave her the rose that day. It was then that she bent down to tell me tender words I remember to this day. I love you, my son, for thinking of me this very special way. I picked a rose for Mama. This story must be told, 'cause when I picked a rose for Mama, my heart was full of gold.
It sounds like you've had a lot of awesome opportunities just kind of fall in your lap along the way from 8 years old to 1976 that people dream of happening. But for you, it was almost like you were lucky. And how do you, if you look back on what you just shared, how do you think about that timeline of how things unfolded? And it sounds like it was easy for you, but a lot of musicians really struggle to make it to the different milestones that you've just shared.
There's no doubt in my mind there was divine intervention. But at the same time, I must have had a little bit of talent, because the statistics are on paper that proves that particular year, the auditioning staff went to 26 different major cities. They went all the way up to Maine. They went to California. They went to 26 major cities auditioning talent for the 1977 season. And they actually auditioned 6,700 kids. And they gave a job to 250 of us. Out of 6,700 people that auditioned, 250 of us got a job.
Wow. And you were one of them.
Yes. So there was some divine intervention there, but there had to be a little bit of talent, or else it wouldn't have happened.
Well, also, I'm a firm believer in that whatever we focus on, we get more of. And I think you had said that at 8 years old, that's when you decided you wanted to be in the music industry. And I would think that you held on to that belief and that desire very steadfastly, so that when the opportunities presented themselves, you didn't question it. You went for it and didn't look at it as, am I going to make it or not? You looked at it as, I'm making it each step of the way.
Well, yeah, and it had its consequences. Like, for example, when I moved to Nashville, I had to sleep the first 3 nights in my car because that $50 wasn't going to go very far.
Right.
It did get me to Nashville. It gave me enough gas to drive from Providence, Rhode Island. Back in the day, you could drive from Providence, Rhode Island to Nashville for $50 worth of gas. You can't do that now, of course. But
No.
but when I got to the rehearsals, I found out there was a lot of kids that were in the same boat I was in. They didn't have any money. They had come there from parts unknown. They didn't have a place to stay. So I buddied up with one of the guys in the cast, and together, the two of us rented an apartment. We split the cost, and so that made it a little bit more tolerable than sleeping in your car.
I would say so, yes.
And they helped. Opryland staff knew the ones that needed help. Some of the girls actually stayed with elderly people that had season passes for the park, and their children were all grown and married out the door. And some of the girls actually stayed with some of the people from the church that they went to. you know, and it was nice. I mean, it was an experience that I don't think I'll ever forget. Now, I don't want to forget what happened when I was there, because I was actually in the Country Music USA cast 77, 78, 79, and 80. And then when 80 hit, that's when the Kitty Wells thing started.
Oh,
So
I'd like to hear about that.
We've advanced up to the year 1980 now.
Okay. So tell me about Kitty Wells.
I can tell you a story of just how humble she was. We were on tour in Germany. In fact, it was the last tour that Dottie West did while she was alive. It was Kitty Wells, Dottie West, a guy named Dave Dudley, which you may or may not know. He's passed also. He had a big hit record called 6 Days on the Road. And we were in this package show. We were in a great big arena in Germany. And it wasn't our turn to go on yet. The opening acts were out there performing. And Kitty was pacing back and forth. We were in the dressing room backstage, and she was just pacing back and forth and back and forth. And I looked at her and I said, Kitty, what in the world is wrong with you tonight? I said, you know, you're going to wear out this carpet the way you're pacing back and forth. I said, is it another one of them migraines? And she said, no, not tonight. I don't have a headache tonight. I said, well, something's wrong with you. You got to quit pacing back and forth. And she looked at me right between the eyeballs and she said, do you think they'll know my songs? There was 30,000 people that paid to see her perform that night. And I said, yeah, they're going to know your songs and they'll probably sing along with you and they'll probably know every word. She was worried to death. Now, this is a woman that had 23 #1 records, 58 albums, Grammy after Grammy after Grammy. And her biggest fear was she was going to get out there and they wouldn't know her songs.
That's interesting. Wow. And where were you playing?
In Germany.
In Germany. Wow. Well, and did the audience know the songs? Yeah. So hopefully after that evening, she didn't question that.
Well, it wasn't very much longer after that they retired anyway. You know.
Yeah. But I bet that was an awesome experience to be with her out in Germany.
We traveled the world. I mean, I played all 50 states, you know, with Kitty. And we played Japan and Germany and Amsterdam and Rotterdam and Holland and the Netherlands. And we played all over the world. Her music was universal. If you were a country fan in her day and didn't know who Kitty Wells was, you wasn't very much of a country music fan.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, if you were invited to go to all those countries, it sounds like she had a pretty global audience that appreciated her voice and her music.
Right. And her husband, Johnny Wright, who was a member of the Johnny and Jack duo in the late 40s, traveled with us. And their son, Bobby Wright, who was on McHale's Navy, his character name was Willie, the Moonshiner, with Tim Conway and Ernest Borgnine. You can see the old reruns. They're in black and white. They're on YouTube. He was with us too. And of course, I was with the Tennessee Mountain Boys. And the Tennessee Mountain Boys was the backup band for the show, for the Kitty Wells family show. And for those of you out there that don't know what the opening act goes through, how would you like to go out there for the first 15 minutes and sing your heart out? And after the second song, the audience is saying, "We want Kitty. We want Kitty." You have to go through that night after night after night as the opening act, which is what I was.
Right. Well, you just kept playing and got them ready for Kitty.
That was it.
So, how long were you in the opening act for Kitty? So that was 1980 until when?
16 years
Oh, that's a long time.
with the same artist.
That's a
16 years with
long
the same
time.
artist.
I'm sure you have a lot more stories that you could tell of being on the road.
You want to hear one now or for another segment?
Let's hear one more, and then we'll move beyond Kitty. Tell us one more road story.
This one involves her husband, Johnny. Johnny was a shade tree mechanic at the very, very best of his ability to fix anything that ran on gasoline or diesel. He could fix it. I mean, this guy, for never having gone to mechanic school and every bit of it was all self-taught. To show you how genius of a man he really was, it was a very, very bad storm up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And a tree had fallen down across the road and it was dark. And our bus driver didn't see it in time and ran right over it and busted a hole in the diesel tank. We had two tanks. There were 75 gallons of diesel on each side, one on the left and one on the right. And there was a lever. If you ran out of diesel on one side, you just flipped the lever and it automatically went over to the other tank. So we had 150 gallons of diesel on board every time we filled up, so that we could make the jumps, because they had a booking agent that would put 1,000 miles between jumps. And you had to get there sometime. Sometimes you had to get there in order to do a matinee.
Oh my gosh. That's a long road trip.
Oh yeah. Well, he ran over it and busted a hole in the tank. And Johnny used to he's old school, and he used to call chewing gum wax. And he always had a piece of wax in his mouth when he sang on stage, because he said it kept his throat moist. So we would always ask Kitty before it was time to go on stage, give me a stick of wax. That's what he called it. We call it chewing gum. So he said, give me 3 or 4 sticks of wax. And she looked at him and she said, 3 or 4? He said, yeah, at least 3 or 4. And he put those all in his mouth at one time and wadded up this great big wad of chewing gum. And in the dark of night, and about, it was cold, it was probably 25 or 30 degrees. He crawled underneath that bus on his back with a flashlight, and he stuck that great big wad of chewing gum up in that hole of that diesel tank. And not only did it hold, but it held good enough for us to drive that bus back to Nashville.
Oh my gosh.
When we got back to Nashville, that big wad of chewing gum was still in that hole in that diesel tank. And of course, they pulled it out and welded the tank at the bus garage and all that. But that wad of chewing gum got us home. Wow. There you have it. There's a Kitty Wells story.
I love it. I love it. So you were with them for 16 years. So let's go down the timeline. What happened after that?
They retired. I came off the road. I was thoroughly disgusted with what mainstream country radio was playing on the air. I got so disgusted I wouldn't even listen to it in my car. And my brother Mike and me would just discuss it. We wouldn't even listen to the radio. It got so bad. And then one day we were sitting there and I said to him, I said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to start our own radio station, play what we want. And no boss, just the two of us. We sit there and play our record collection and talk about what we want and do what we want. And he said, well, you know, the internet radio stations, he said, if once we sign up, we got to go 24/7. I said, what do you mean? I said, we can't go on for 1 hour. That's not a radio station. That's like a podcast. once you open up your doors and say you're a radio station, you got to have content 24/7, 365. So that led to quite an obstacle of getting enough songs that would play where you wouldn't hear the same songs over and over and over again. It led to quite an obstacle, but we ended up, to this day, we now have over 50,000 songs
Oh my
in our
goodness.
computer system that we can pull from for our programming. So that's been quite an adventure running a internet radio station.
Oh, I'm sure it has. How long have you had it now?
20 years.
20 years. Wow. Wow. That's a long time. How long did it take you to build it to the 50,000 songs?
We were downloading them as fast as we could. I was downloading them on one computer at home. He was downloading them on another computer. We had friends sending us songs that they thought we would like to play, plus our own private collection. And we dumped a bunch of the 12-inch LPs and even my old 45 RPM records. We dumped those into MP3s. We had this computer software to convert the files.
Right.
It took a while to get that many songs. Probably took 5 years to get that many.
And you're still adding songs.
Every day. Every day. I'm still adding interviews that you're going to send me.
Yes, sir. You just let the cat out of the bag, which I greatly appreciate. So I have a couple more questions. So you've had a very fulfilling music career. You've been a songwriter, you've been on the road, you've traveled the world. Is there anything that you want to share with people in today's day and age? Because it's different from when you were growing up and coming through the music industry, for people today that are trying to expose themselves and make a name for themselves as a musician. What kind of advice or words of wisdom would you like to share?
Being a good singer is not enough. You can be even better singer than the ones that are in the top 40 charts. You may be better than the person that has the #1 record in the nation in Billboard magazine right now. And everybody knows that you're a better singer than that person. But that's not good enough. And in this day and age, you've got to be smart. You can't just be a good singer. You've got to know the computer. You've got to know social media. You've got to have people skills. It's not just a good voice anymore. You have got to treat this as a business, because when you write down the 2 words, when you take a pencil and a piece of paper and you write down the 2 words, music, business, just write down those 2 words and stare at them. Music, which one of them 2 words is larger?
Business.
That's my advice.
That's great advice. And I think people will probably take that to heart and follow through with thinking about, what does that mean? What does it mean to have a music business versus just trying to go out there and make a name for yourself? Because it is a process.
Not only is it a process, but it's ever changing. It's changing by the hour.
Yes, that is true. So how do you keep up with it if it's changing by the hour?
I mean, you know yourself, your Facebook page, for example, does not look today like it looked last week.
No.
There's something different about it, almost on a daily basis. You agree with that?
I do. They're always changing the algorithms and changing, how things look. Absolutely. And then we have to adjust and adapt and pivot. And there's so many different opportunities, and trying to weed through what is the best avenue is key, because there are a lot of people are doing the same thing, but it's who do you trust, and what direction do you take yourself?
I can give you an example to prove my point, hands down, about the business side of the industry, if you'd like me to.
I would love to hear that. Yes.
There was a guy named Tiny Tim, and he had a big hit record called Tiptoe Through the Tulips. And hands down, he was not a very handsome man. And he played the ukulele backwards. He played it upside down because he was left-handed. And ukulele is not a mainstream instrument for a recording artist, for sure. But the guy was not an attractive man. He could barely play the ukulele. He sang like some kind of an opera singer, I suppose, that high falsetto voice of his, Tiptoe Through the Tulips. He was selling out in Las Vegas at the height of his career. A man that's not attractive, a man that can't sing, a man that can't barely play the ukulele, but he's selling out every night in Las Vegas. What he had was the greatest marketing team that has ever existed in show business. The man was on the Johnny Carson show. And what does he do? He marries Miss Vicky in front of 40 million viewers on the Johnny Carson show. He marries this woman that's named Miss Vicky. 9 months later, they come back on the Carson show with their firstborn. And what do they name her? Tulip. After Tiptoes. And it goes on and on and on. But I won't bore you with the rest of the detail. But there's a prime example of the marketing took over the music.
Well, and it was almost like he created a storyline that people wanted to follow. You know, there's emotional content in it. People could identify because he made himself look like a regular person that had a great story.
So there it is in a nutshell. It's all about the business, not about the music.
Well, thank you for sharing your words of wisdom on that, having been in the industry for a very long time. So how can people find you, and what's the link, or where can they listen to your radio station?
nbrnonline.com is the radio station. It's on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You will not always hear a live DJ throughout the day, in the weeks, in the months. Some of it's pre-recorded, but we do have several live DJs that work at the station at various days and time. Up at the very top of the screen, when you get on nbrnonline.com, up at the very top, there's a button called Program Guide. And when you click on the Program Guide, every day of the week and what time the shows are is all listed right there. In case you're wondering what's coming up next, it's all right there in the Program Guide.
That sounds great. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for telling us about your journey. I think it's amazing that such a young age you knew you wanted to be in music, and all these years later you're still very fully vested in it and participating and sharing and helping other musicians to have a voice. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and some of the ups and some of the downs, and but truly, you know, it's inspiring to hear how all those stepping stones just kept you moving forward, and the opportunities that were presented. And I hope that the people watching this feel the same way, that it's inspiring and uplifting. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on your program, and I look forward to seeing it on the Roku box.
Absolutely, yes. People will be able to watch this on Knob TV, Roku, and OTEL Talk.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So we'll talk later. We'll see you soon, and have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.